Hi, my name is Adam Sussman, partner and head of research at TABB Group, joined by Haim Bodek, managing principal at Decimus Capital Markets. Haim, in your book, The Problem of HFT, you detail a lot of the information asymmetry that occurred at the exchanges in regards to their order types. And now, in your words, they've gone a long way towards cleaning that up. I'm curious, from your perspective, what does that mean for the markets? Are the markets going to become less complex as a result of this?
The net impact of addressing maybe some of the asymmetries in the market, the net impact has been to make these order types actually more complex.
More complex?
Yeah.
Why is that?
There are the additional conditions and exceptions that if you're going to be a user of that order type, you actually have to know those exceptions to use it effectively.
So even though it's become a level playing field, in fact, it's become harder to operate in.
Yeah, so it's not every exchange, but certain exchanges have become absolutely more transparent, and some asymmetries that concern me have been addressed. And
Right.
when you look at those, you're like, okay, am I happy with that? Is that where I wanted this thing to go when I first became a market reform advocate? And I look at it, I go, if that was the way this market was structured back in 2009, and if that documentation was available in
Right.
2009, would I have gone this direction? And the answer is no. I probably would have been like, that's okay. That's a pain to learn it all. Very, very complex. But yeah, that's a situation where I could do my homework and participate, in the call it the ultra.
So that makes you a little bit different than some of the other market structure advocates, in the space right now that would probably view this in some ways as a negative.
I think of it as a compromise. It's like we had a market that was out of whack, and there were, some of the leadership in the industry said, the markets are more sophisticated, more complex, but anybody can, if they do their homework, anybody can learn how to use them appropriately.
Right.
And what you've actually seen in the last year is some movement towards, at least on some exchanges, that's a true statement now,
Right.
where it wasn't 18 months ago.
So if there's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, where do you think U.S. markets are? U.S. equity market structure is on the 5 stages of grief.
You had all this
Right.
bargaining
Yep.
happen in some manner. I can't say I know exactly how it all played out, but it's very clear that there was dialogue and assessment throughout the entirety of 2012,
Right.
and a significant amount of change. So where are we now is, I think, the players from whom this information is news are grappling with it, and there probably is some depression. Okay.
Well, they're going to have to spend a lot more money figuring out how to use these order types, right?
There's also depression, absolutely depression. If you look at some of the current status of business models of HFTs, the peak is way over. The information asymmetry is in the process of being neutralized, and that's not a very encouraging
Right.
result for that play. For that contingency. It's not great for the exchanges either, but I do think the whole thing is the natural process of what was in effect a completely unsustainable business model for how liquidity was provided in the U.S. equity markets. I mean, we're gonna get to this point at some point.
So what does the last stage look like? Acceptance. I mean, how are the market participants, particularly the people with fiduciary obligations, how are they going to, now they have to accept the fact that there are these order types that they can and need to use?
Yeah, this is interesting because when I looked at the order types, and especially some of the changes that happened in the last year that were very interesting to me, because I have my list of complaints and I have some change that and there's seems to be some correlation between the two, and I look at it and I say, God, this is a pain, and this is a pain to use this. For me, this is
Right.
difficult to use to really assess these new features, and you need the speed and precision of your system. So when that microstructure condition happens, when you get that reject message because of condition A,
Yep.
you have to look at respond to it correctly. And I look at it, this is a pain. What do you get out of it? you don't actually get much. It's not, you don't make money now, especially now with the leveling. You're not going to make money off these features. But what's actually interesting is if you don't use them, you're still going to lose money.
Right.
So HFTs and the sell side, from my perspective, when you actually know the numbers, know how things work, know the history of how egregious the slippage was to HFT through these features, when you look at them, you're like, this is very similar. I'll give you a metaphor or example to when when smart order routing became transformed from a new technology that could give better performance to something that was just, basically a basic requirement.
Right.
And fiduciary obligation.
Well, and when
for
smart order
execution.
routing used to just be based on, it would just be like the alphabetical order of the exchanges, right? And then it obviously transformed into something much smarter than that. I mean, it wasn't smart order routing when it was just alphabetic, but to your point, it used to be crude, and then it got smarter. Yeah,
and I actually did one of my big projects when I was working at UBS was to work on the options order router. For which I designed the order routing logic, and I remember at that time that across the industry there were firms that were struggling because they did not have the technical competency to build one of those. Now, from my perspective, I'm coming from a market making unit, and this is a side project for me.
Right.
And I'm like, this is easy compared to, electronic market making.
Right.
And it was interesting that there were, client-facing institutions that were struggling with the concept of smart order routing. Now, today's age, everyone's going to say everybody can do it.
Right.
So that's what I think people are not fully appreciating right now, is that the structure of U.S. markets, the implementation of Reg NMS, the fragmentation issue, have made the usage of these features, which are all related to addressing, very important properties of Reg NMS and fragmentation with regard to order handling.
Yep.
Okay? If we're going to have a market structure like this, you have to use these features in the same way where way back in early 2000s when we started getting a diversity of exchange venues, you had to do SOR.
Right.
There was just a point in time where you had to do it. And that's my forecast. My forecast is unless industry rises up and says, we have to eliminate the complexity.
Right, which unlikely to happen in the near term.
Given from where I am right now, I see. I can't speak for regulators, but it looks like that providing transparency, information, eliminating information asymmetry, and neutralizing some bad things. That seems to be the interest.
Yep. Not
going in and reducing all this complexity down to something where we get to go back in time. Yep. So going forward, we are all going to have to become more sophisticated users of the marketplace, and it has nothing to do with my opinions. It's like that's where we are today.
Right.
Right.
No, I think that's consensus. Yeah.
So another takeaway there is that standing on the sidelines and being a market reform advocate and pushing for that. It's good to push for those issues,
right?
But that shouldn't be your business plan. Your business plan should be digging into how do these order types impact the passive non-marketable orders that I send to the market.
Right.
That would mean the most basic thing, and anybody who is familiar or has done tests between, I'll call it like vanilla professional order types,
right,
and the what I call HFT-oriented order types. If you do a comparison between those two, you will note extreme differences in performance in fast-moving market conditions, which we've had quite a number of over the last 5 years. So I guess the basic takeaway is, in fast market moving conditions, if you're not employing the basic features of these, then you are a victim to all these unintended consequences of fragmentation and the implementation of Reg NMS at the exchanges and you are.
But more importantly, now that there's more transparency into the order types, you really have no one to blame but yourself now.
Yeah, and I think the problem is that if firms don't, it might not be the best time for the industry to do what I think is, I'm thinking of this from called an intellectual perspective. It's like certain firms should be kicking off projects to create technology platforms and execution capabilities that are very similar to how HFTs have operated for 10 years. Right? And some firms have those capabilities, others don't. Very similar to the, should I build a smart order right now to address the multiple venue issue or not back in the 2000s?
No, I think what you're saying, we'll wrap it up here, is that, based on the complexity, the fragmentation, and now the level playing field, in regards to order types, we're all HFT.
Yeah, we have an HFT-oriented market, and even though, call it pure HFT, where you can make a significant P&L employing execution strategies, that may be on the wane, but the usage and importance of HFT-oriented execution strategies for the entire industry is actually on the rise. You have this strange transformation. So it may be that HFT goes away, but we all have to do a poor man's version of HFT in the end.
Excellent. Well, Haim, thanks for joining me. This has been Adam Sussman, Director of Research at TABB Group. Again, joined by Haim Bodek. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.